Congressman from the 1st District in Jerry Moran.
Good afternoon, everyone. It gives me great hope because of the Tea Party movement, the 9/12, and town hall meetings that we can turn this country around. Do not rely upon those in Washington to do that. It will not happen without your participation and involvement. We can have little faith in our elected officials. We can have great faith in the American people. And it is necessary for you to do what you are doing here today and throughout the year as we see what's happening to our country. Oftentimes, the national media portrays the town hall participants, the Tea Parties, and the 9/12 crowd as as a bunch of crazy right-wing ideologues. People who don't know what they're thinking, don't know what they're doing. I do 69 town hall meetings every year. I'm approaching my 900th town hall meeting as a member of Congress. What I see is these are normal, everyday Kansans, Americans, who have a genuine concern about the future of their country. And I would tell the liberal national media, who in their right mind, what American today wouldn't have a concern about the future of our country based upon what we've seen taking place in our nation's capital over the last several years. It is a serious challenge that we face. All my life I've been told this is the most important election of your lifetime. I don't know that I ever believed it, but I believe it today. Our country is bankrupt. Politicians ought to admit it. We cannot continue with business as usual, politics the same. An agenda that we ought to pursue in our nation's capital would be a balanced budget amendment, because we've not been able to hold our officials' feet to the fire and allow them to do it, or allow them to do it in a way that actually moves us in the right direction. The tendency to spend money is too great. We absolutely ought to have earmark reform. Earmarks are the way that they buy votes. You get a $500,000 bridge and it causes you to vote for a $1.3 trillion spending bill. It's got to change. It cannot be business as usual. We need the line item veto. Congress has got to be held accountable. I have signed a pledge and believe this, that if health care reform, by hook or crook, if anything close to what the House and Senate have passed, and now President Obama is pushing again, if anything close to that becomes law, I will day one introduce a resolution to repeal it and rally the American people to say no once again. What didn't we learn from Massachusetts? Mary Pilcher Cook and a crew in Topeka are working on the state level to make certain that if that bill becomes law, Kansans are not affected by this national mandate for health care. I support her efforts. In this Congress and in the future, we have to make sure that despite the President Obama's claim that he's going to reform immigration, what that is a message that he is pushing amnesty. If you talk about health care and you want to do something about health care, one of the things that we have not done is take care of the number of people who are here illegally taking advantage of our health care system, and it has a huge consequence, the cost of health care in the United States. So no to amnesty. We must change our tax code. April 15th is approaching, and we're going to do it by the fair tax. It matters. This is an item that will improve the economy and create jobs in a dramatic way. It is a realization that we have a tax code that people spend their lives and their business time trying to figure out how do we satisfy the tax code, the tax man, and in the process, they give up their personal liberties and freedoms to make decisions that are in their own best interest and the best interest for their business, rather than trying to decide how do I satisfy the government. This is about personal liberty and freedom, and the fair tax is a route to a greater personal freedom and liberty in this country. And we ought to impose term limits upon our elected officials. And it ought to be nationwide. I've been a member of Congress for a bit now, and so when I talk about term limits, I don't want to be a hypocrite. I have voted for term limits, support term limits. I believe that Washington, D.C. is a culture, a way of life that changes even people with the best of intentions. They go to the nation's capital, but they get wrapped up in what is Washington, D.C. wants. The message of Massachusetts, yes, had something to do with health care, but what I think the real message of Massachusetts election was, look, you Democrats and Republicans in Washington, D.C., this is about us, the people, not about you, the representatives and senators. We've got to change the way that Washington looks at who they are. And when you are done with people, when you're done with me as a member of Congress, as a representative, when I no longer serve in Washington, D.C., I will be back in Kansas living among the people who sent me there. In fact, we never moved to Washington, D.C. For 14 years, I have come home every weekend to live and be among the people who hired me to represent them in our nation's capital. And finally, I think we could solve so many things in this country if we simply had a court that would enforce the 10th Amendment to the United States Constitution. It would change the world. The 10th Amendment, as you know, is the one that says all those powers not specifically granted to the federal government are reserved to the states and the people. And while we have not had courts that have interpreted the 10th Amendment in the way that I think it should be, what I now call upon is me and my colleagues, the people who represent us in Washington, D.C., if the court is not going to force you to live under the Constitution, do it yourself, do it voluntarily, and quit passing laws that don't abide by the Constitution. Now, finally, let me say that I was asked the question yesterday, are you worried that the Tea Party movement is going to undermine the Republican Party? My answer to that is that those who support the kind of effort that's taking place here today, we ought to be answering your questions, answering your requirements. You ought not have to fit into the Republican Party. The Republican Party ought to adopt what you stand for. And so the answer to that question is, if Republicans don't abide by the principles that we believe in as American people, then the Republican Party doesn't deserve our support. And I think the Republicans are beginning to understand this, and if by chance you give us the opportunity to be the majority, to have a new president, then you do have to hold us accountable to abide by the things that we say we were going to do. Don't let us escape like it happened the last time. We have to bring control to government, and the belief in a fiscal responsibility, paying our way, reducing the size of government is the things that bring us all together. God bless you. Thank you for your efforts to save our country. We are allies in that effort. Thank you all.